Hello, my name is Kevin Freeman. Welcome to Being Unique. This is the first segment in a series of conversations that I plan on having with some people that I find to be very interesting, creative, thoughtful, and unique. And today we have Roland Labrie, who's a good friend of mine, who's come by. He's the first interviewee that we have. And he's written a book called
Reaching for Quiet.
Reaching for Quiet. Welcome, Roland.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Kevin.
So I kind of would like to start right out in the middle of things. I prepared some questions, but one that, as I was preparing the questions, Roland and I have had conversations before about poetry and a creative process. And I know that he likes John Ashbery because he has an unpublished poem, which is it called "Oh, Make Me a Boy Again"?
Oh, Make Me a Boy Again.
Yeah. And so I did a little bit of looking into John Ashbery, and he has a quote that I found was kind of pertinent for our conversation. And John says, "A poem comes out of thin air." And so I kind of would like to start there and see what you thought about that.
Well, my poems, in a sense, come out of thin air. There's always something that occurs to me deep inside that's usually what eventually becomes a line in the poem. You know, it's something verbal that wells up, emerges. It's from some experience that I'm undergoing or remembering, and it's the beginning, you know.
So is it kind of like you're kind of swiping that mosquito right out of the sky?
It's more like the mosquito comes and lands on me and is ready to bite. And then I say, oh,
yeah.
I wake up.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning. With me, there's a gestation process that follows that.
Okay.
A poem can be years in the making, you know. But
yeah.
It does, in a sense, some people would call that inspiration.
Yeah.
There is a sense in which it just comes out of the blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you first have that impetus when the muse strikes and you have a poem, does it come to you literally, or how does it come to you?
It's language. It's words. It's language. It's and the language, the line that I might develop, it's of course it's tied to life. It's tied to experience. It's tied to memory. You know what I mean? It doesn't exist out there in a vacuum.
Right.
But it's the beginning. It's the nucleus. It's the neural.
So
it's the very center of growth.
Would it be an emotion that triggers?
Well, emotion is definitely a part. It is emotional.
And then
for me, poetry is visceral. It's emotional. It's not rational. Just rational thought and logical processes.
Yes.
It's everything coming together for me.
And so is there a point when the poems actually turn into words?
Yes. It's one way of saying it would be to say that once I have the thought, the experience, the emergence of what I call a line, they have to be words. And some words are coming together. And I can begin to consider those words, and I can begin to add and subtract other words and other lines. I build poems. For me, it's really a process of making something. It's not automatic. It doesn't even take 20 minutes or 20 hours. It can take 20 days or 20 years.
Yeah.
You know.
There's one.
How is that for an answer, Kevin?
It's very good. And I guess that leads me into this poem that I'm fascinated by.
Which one is that?
If it's in the book, then I have it right here.
It might be in the poem for the muse.
Oh, okay, I got it. It's on page 36. 37, you're right, yeah.
37, yeah.
Okay.
In the poem for the muse.
Okay. So this is to me, this is like, when I read this, it's exceptional because it just broadens my expectations of my own creative experience. I'm going to read this if I can.
Sure.
Okay. In Wonder Man Will sonnets are bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In Cummings, There are things which I cannot touch because they are too near. So pay attention. This is not about exciting boyfriends and exotic vacations. This is about the famous fire in the mind, not the stuff museums are made of. And I just really love the way that you oppose. This is about the famous fire in the mind, and then in a way you seem to diminish what the museums are made of, but not really, because then I think that this is where that I know you, which takes the experience of the poem to another level. I presume that I know some things about you.
Right. This is a living poem, not a dead thing on exhibit. Is what, you know.
And I know how much you love paintings.
I love paintings. I love museums. I love sculpture.
Yeah. Right. And so you take this, you go back to history and you pull up Shakespeare, and then E. Cummings, who, you know, I know you love and I do too. And it's not about exciting boyfriends and exotic vacations. It's about the famous fire in the mind.
It's alive right now.
And that is that's so poignant, and just I just really love that. Yeah.
The last lines of that poem relate right back to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then for anybody who's interested, Reaching for Quiet is the name of Roland's book, and I'm going to put his email address on the bottom here so that you can get in touch with him if you'd like to. The middle of this poem is very engaging, and it's also it takes a lot of time to start to understand.
It's like a balloon swelling; it fills.
It is, yeah, and then it comes back like you said, But the first part of this really piques
the impetus, the push.
Yeah,
the poem begins with a real push.
Yeah, and
it's very strong. It's very alive.
Yeah, you've opened it up and you've said,
"This is not about junk.
Yeah,
this is about something really worthwhile."
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And so you set that standard, and then where do you go from there?
I have very high standards. I have high expectations of poems.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing.
Can I talk about language a bit, or did you want?
Yes, you definitely can.
Well, for me, it is about language. It is about words. It is about making something. It's art. It's about making something. We don't tend to think of a poem or anything that's constructed of words as an object, but there is a sense in which making a good poem is making an object.
Yes.
It's certainly an object on the printed page.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But more than that, it's like when you go and watch a dance performance, the dancers are performing and creating beautiful art right in front of you, you know, and then it's over and they leave the stage.
Yes.
But inside of yourself, you can always carry the dance performance. It's a real, even though it's intangible.
Yes.
You know, you can't weigh it.
Yeah.
You know, you can't say what color it is.
Yeah.
But it's real.
Yeah, and so
and a good poem is like that. It's a construct in language that's very, very carefully worked out. The words in the poem are like the cars of a freight train. They're heavily loaded.
Yes.
The words are working very, very hard.
And like dance and music, do you have the element of time? Is that
right?
It is
right.
Because it also, when I think of some of your poems, and one that you're going to read, I think Old Roses, it's contained, it's like encapsulated by time.
Right.
But in my mind, when I think of it overall, I don't think of the element of time like I would necessarily a piece of music. I think of more of as an object. You know, it is more like an object.
Right. Yeah.
Now, when you read it, it becomes an element of time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
And is that something that you're conscious of? Like a dancer would be like, this step comes here now.
I relate the time factor to the ephemeral factor. It's like when the dance performance is over and the dancers leave the stage, when the musicians finish performing the song or the symphony, and all is quiet again. It's ephemeral. It's gone.
Yeah.
Except it's not gone.
Yeah.
Of course, it could be recorded by cameras and all that.
Yeah.
But even without that kind of recording it, you saw the performance. It moved you.
Yeah.
You care about it. It now exists inside of you.
Yeah.
10 or 15 years later, your mind can turn back to that, and you can remember.
Yes.
You know, the evening you went to hear your favorite jazz group.
Yeah.
You know, you may or may not hear the music again, but you can recapture the experience always.
Yeah.
And that's art.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
just any old collection. Let's say you were listening to inferior music, or you were reading poetry that claimed to be a poem, but wasn't really. It was just just spouting words, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then 10 or 15 years later, it's not memorable speech. You won't be able to go back in your mind and recall a line from it that's meaningful for you in your life today.
Yeah.
You know, I know I harp on that a lot, Kevin, but it's really true. Poetry is not a clever arrangement of words against the left-hand margin. Mm-hmm. That is not what poetry is. Yeah. If it reads like prose, what Gertrude Stein said this to Alice B. Toklas. Yeah. If it reads like prose, it probably is. Yeah. You know, poems are crafted. They're made. They can very often be very hard work and take very long periods of time to get right. Yeah. You know.
And another thing is that sometimes the more that you read a poem, the more you sort of cultivate a relationship with it.
And with different poets.
Yes, and it has more of a significant meaning, especially when you read them at different
It deepens periods. All the time, throughout your whole life.
So you don't think with a lesser poem the same thing could happen?
Oh no, not every poem is a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Not every poem is Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. That's not the point. Yeah. But a poem has to be good enough to be a poem. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a collection of words. Yeah. You know, it might be autobiographical or confessional. It might be inspirational. It might be a lot of very interesting and sometimes worthwhile things. Yeah. But it may not be a poem. Yeah. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. You know.
So when did you understand that you would aspire to write poetry?
Well, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager in high school, like in all the lit books we had every year was like American Lit, English Lit, all this stuff. Yeah. I mean, I would go through all the books and read all the poems. I would memorize most of them.
Wow.
I should tell you about a poem I'm working on right now. Yeah. I'm working on a poem. Almost all of my poems will fit easily on a page. They're almost all very short. I'm working on a poem that is 60 lines long.
Wow.
It's in 3 sections of 20 lines, 20 lines, and 20 lines. All of the lines in the poem, I'm a Billy Collins fan. Yeah. Billy Collins has a famous poem that begins, we break into the poems of others, we steal from each other. Yeah. And the whole poem is constructed of lines from other poets' poems. You know, and there are 2 or 3 of my own lines in there too. Wow. And I'm working. It's all from memory. Yeah. It's all lines that I can gather and from poems that I've memorized. I mean, some of them I didn't realize I was memorizing. Yeah. And I'm working this mosaic out because it has to be meaningful. It has to work. Yeah. You know, it can't be gibberish. And it's a fascinating experience for me to discover. And so many of the lines in the poems, I talk about memorable speech. Poetry is memorable speech. Uh-huh. I can reach into my mind to poems that I read 20 years ago, and I can mine them and arrange them in a meaningful way that's meaningful to me and to my life. Yeah. You know what I mean?
So you started with 60 lines and you didn't have any content.
I could go on. What I realized was I could write a poem of 100 lines or possibly 200 or 300 or 400 lines from memory. And this is, for me, it's proving to myself that poetry is memorable speech. Right. And I can remember and pull all those lines out from those poems in my mind, in my memory, in a meaningful way. They're all meaningful and significant to me.
Which is a given, but it's also an exercise in improbability, maybe, that you're taking on this challenge with given what you consider to be great poems. Exactly. So you already have those. Right. And then you craft those into a sequence, which gives them new life and new meaning.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
And great poets. I mean, we have Gerard Manley Hopkins and William Shakespeare and Emily Dickinson and John Donne. And amongst the moderns, we have Ted Kooser and Seamus Heaney and Billy Collins.
You have all those people in there?
They're all the way back from Chaucer to the present.
Wow.
And it is amazing what beautiful and breathtaking and heartbreaking poems there are in the language. It is just astounding.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and you and I have talked before about how that a poem how does it get into our psyche, and how do we go, wow, how when two words like juxtapose each other and they have such a different significance than they do when they're just on their own, and how can they like explode our emotion in that way, just by being words. That's the magic of poetry to me.
That's the art of the poet.
Yeah.
And the beauty and magic of language brought together. You know, and woven together, you know, not stuck together with like, you know, glue and popsicle sticks. Yeah. Woven together into something that works. Yeah. That's meaningful.
And you gave this copy, or Amber has obtained this copy of your book, Reaching for Quiet. And I noticed you inscribed in the front, it said, Amber, a collection of poems is like a box of chocolates. You rummage around and nibble away until you find the ones you like.
Right. I really believe that if any poet or any collection of poems, it's like not every poem works for every person. Yeah. Different people will be touched and moved or gain insights or epiphanies from different poems. Yes. Not every, so my approach to an anthology or to a collection of poems is to rummage around. It's like Emily Dickinson, 1,775 poems. You know what I mean? So many of which I know well, and I can go back to them in my mind, but I can also pick up Johnson's book, the edited book of Dickinson's poems, and I can like flip around and I can find more poems that really, and sometimes I'll read a poem, like an Emily Dickinson poem, and this sounds like sacrilege, but there are many of her poems that they're just not meaningful to me. I don't believe poems should be cryptic. I don't think poems should be hard. I don't think there should be puzzles, you know, for people to figure out. I think a poem in the final analysis, the poem has to come through with some kind of clarity, you know, and meaning to the reader or speaker. It has to hang together. There has to be some there.
Yeah, there has to be a resonance.
A poem is not a puzzle.
Yeah, and it has to resonate, I mean, with your heart. Now, we could talk about nostalgic poems, but if it resonates with the soul, I think that it has the highest potential. And so some of the poets that I like most, that's what is compelling about reading like 3 or 4 words together, and you just have this like a spiritual it's experience, which is like,
exactly.
And you can't have that in anything else.
And that's all there is to it. I walked into the Currier Gallery in Manchester, and right straight in front of me, in room number 2, was a Constable painting. I would never believe that the Currier Gallery owned a Constable, and I was just like so taken with it. And it is a very beautiful painting. And I stood there in front of it for 10 or 15 minutes, and I was really impacted. And I went away, and before I left the museum, I went back to it. And I was impacted again in a different way, less impacted. But it's, and I don't need to describe the painting and tell you all about the painting and how meaningful the painting was to me. And what the art is about is the impact. And what I take away is what, you know, the art is for.
I think that certain paintings you can have a literal transformative experience.
Sure, and you can with a good poem.
Oh yeah.
And I don't mean to denigrate. I mean, a lot of people write. They used to call it doggerel and sing-songy stuff. And I don't mean to put people down. I mean, who are writing inspirational verses or even Hallmark greeting card verses. I mean, that's just like what some people do. And
and there's a place for everything.
There is a place for everything, you know. But I know I make pronouncements and I have very, very strong opinions about these things. And I'm 71 years old. I have been reading poetry since I was a child. My mother was full of Longfellow's poems, always reciting
Wow.
Longfellow's, Village Blacksmith and Wreck of the Hesperus and all these poems when we were children.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with poetry and that language. And I'm passionate about it. It's been an important part of my life.
Your mother's primary language was English?
English, right, yeah. But I had a mother who went to 6 grades of school, period.
Yeah.
And how she was such a reader.
Yeah.
And such a learner. I was always amazed at that.
Yeah. So you're going to read us a poem?
Oh, I will if you would like me to.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are so many. I had marked so many that are brief and beautiful, Mm-hmm. I'll read Old Roses first. I thought
that's great. Yeah.
Old Roses. These old roses can best be found around cellar holes of old farms long abandoned, buildings sometimes burned or simply fallen in and forgotten. Wading through field flowers and brambles and brush, I come upon these stragglers, spindling among sill stones, straying in forever. They whisper their nevers, the roses, to the ruthless woods encroaching, quenching the light they lust for through the lazy years. Home again, in summer's memory tightly hugged, in a deep and truly purple bowl, is a pinkest handful, carefully not clenched all the long walk home. It is already tomorrow in their flaring hearts, this hasty June, these old dooryard roses, in their new and final beauty shattering, faint and wrinkled at their edges, petal by petal across the table. Well, this poem is called The Blue Chair. The Blue Chair. I come home from work and find you on the porch, papers spread, painting its fine up and down spindles. You run the brush along the rungs in long, slow strokes, on your knees, the chair balancing you tipping the chair, deep in your important play. Now you are far, far away. The blue chair is anywhere around the house, saying over and over, no absence can be real when I am caught in this bright minute. Mighty you kneeling over me gripped in that same strong and easy way. This will always be your chair. I will do this one twice. Sometimes I do my poems are mostly very short, half a minute. And sometimes it helps the listener if it hears the poem and then hears it again. Yeah, it's a question of sinking in, I think. Yeah. While weeding. I love this poem. The garden misses you. Not the flowers. Everyone thinks it's about the flowers. Well, it's not. Oh, they're still there, flashing and dripping their countless colors all day long, and standing patiently in the negative under the moon at night. No, it's about this other place that melts and fuses longing into somewhere else we go. You know where I'll be, the place where even the birds are used to me missing you. Their just perceptible chatter is all about wondering where you are. While weeding. The garden misses you. Not the flowers. Everyone thinks it's about the flowers. Well, it's not. Oh, they're still there, flashing and dripping their countless colors all day long, and standing patiently in the negative under the moon at night. No, it's about this other place that melts and fuses longing into somewhere else we go. You know where I'll be, the place where even the birds are used to me missing you. Their just perceptible chatter is all about wondering where you are.
Now, are those two sibling poems?
Well, they're I hate the phrase short and sweet.
Yeah.
They're short, they are intense, yes. And they're deep.
Yes.
And they're among, of the 50 poems in this book, I think I told you once, I think that maybe of the 50 poems, 25 are very good, mm-hmm. And 12 or 13 are, from my point of view, they're masterpieces. Okay. I couldn't write better poems than a dozen some of these. You know.
Yeah, and the blue chair is like what we talked about earlier is contained like
The blue chair. This will always be your chair.
Yeah.
I will always be yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's there's a metaphor there. Some people would say, oh, they would understand that there's a triple meaning. There's the face value, you know,
Yeah.
and then there's the obvious comparison, a metaphor, and then there's that deeper underlying. You know, for me, it's a triple entendre. Instead of a double entendre, it's a triple entendre. That's, you know.
So when you started this poem, do you remember, were you going for that?
This poem comes directly from a personal experience. Not many of my poems come from an actual direct. This poem is autobiographical.
Yeah.
This actually happened to me.
Yeah.
Very few of my poems are actually autobiographical.
It's like you're witnessing it, and then you paint
I
this.
did. I came home from work, and my friend Ralph was painting the chair out on the porch on newspapers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I watched him paint most of the chair.
Yeah.
And it was an experience just watching him do that.
Yeah.
And the metaphor launched itself inside of me.
Yeah.
He was treating the chair as he treats me, or he treated me.
Yeah.
And he is now far, far away.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
But the chair is here.
Yeah.
And in my mind and in my memory.
Yeah.
You know, I become the chair.
You do, and you did.
This will always be his chair, and I will always be Ralph's.
Yeah, and you did a really good transitioning the chair from him to the chair.
I didn't want to be clumsy.
So the chair is an object.
The chair is an object, but it's a symbol. It's a metaphor.
It's what you have left.
Yes, right.
And
I still have the chair.
Yeah.
And every time I would see the chair, it could bring back the memories.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, that's the whole point.
It
The
is,
chair. Yeah. The chair is anywhere around the house, saying over and over, no absence can be real. As much as someone is absent, as much as you miss them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the absence is, you know, we all long for and miss. You know, that's, you know, but and that's real.
Yeah.
But it's also real that it's a great paradox.
Yeah.
We simultaneously, as long as I can remember you, I have you.
Yeah.
You know, a friend of mine who died in 1974 is alive and well inside of me.
Yes.
That's what this poem is about.
Yeah, and when you have that physical extension, like the chair, or if you're using a hammer of your father's or something, it enhances that.
Exactly.
And it's very interesting that an object, you can make a connection. It's like a conduit to that person.
Yes,
you know?
and that's because it's tangible. It's physical.
It is.
It's concrete.
But it's real. But it almost supersedes love in a way, because it becomes an enabler. But wouldn't you think that love would be the dominant?
I would say it becomes an enhancer.
Yeah.
An enhancer, not so much an enabler. It's an enabler in the sense in which the physical object makes it possible.
But you have it without the physical, without the object.
But that's the metaphor. Then the object becomes the symbol of the metaphor.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then the intangible part is you launch from the tangible and the concrete into. I
often wonder how an inanimate object has so much significance or power.
I know, it is amazing. Isn't it?
I wouldn't. Yeah. If I just saw a hammer, for example,
right.
I would just think it was insignificant.
Right.
But when it has a connection to somebody that's deceased or something, it has a totally different meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's.
I believe in real things, intangible things. There's a little book called The Velveteen Rabbit. Yeah. And the children eventually rub all the fur and the velvet off the rabbit. Yeah. And you'd think that it would be thrown off into the dump or something. Yeah. And the truth is the rabbit was so transformed by their love. Yeah. He became more beautiful and more real. The more they rubbed him and stained him and rubbed his fur and velvet off and everything, the more beat up the rabbit became, the more beautiful and full of love, you know. Yeah. It's a metaphor.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You know.
So when I read your poems, a lot of your poems are about another person, and you bring them in, and a lot of times I don't know if that person could be myself, because sometimes you'll say you, and that
I use you a lot.
yeah.
My life has been an I-you kind of thing.
Yeah. And but the you never is not you.
No.
So you're not speaking second person or third person.
Right.
Um,
To me, many of my poems, in a sense, are relationships. So the you for me in one of my poems is the you for me. The you in one of my poems can be the you for you.
right.
Not my you, your you.
Yeah. So
you hear people talk about I, thou.
Yeah.
Philosophers talk about the I, thou.
Yeah.
Transactions and relationships that people have.
Yeah.
But many of my poems have this. The you shouldn't be mysterious.
Well, it is. It diminishes the individuality, I think.
Yeah.
So as opposed to a name, if you said
Well,
Tom or Jake or something.
I do in some poems.
I know. That's what I was going to get to.
I have a poem called Bertha.
Yeah.
And it's about a specific you.
It is, yeah. And also one of your new poems.
Was there a name in one of my new poems?
Well, the one about David.
Oh, yes, right, the letter.
Yeah.
Yes, that is an interesting poem. My friend David turned 21, I think in 1974. He had his 21st birthday.
Yeah.
And I was probably 24 years old at the time or something like that. And David went off to Columbia and became a journalist. He lives in London now. I came across a letter that he had written to be about in June of 1974, which I think was also his birth month and 21st birthday. And I found this old letter amongst some old papers and documents I had. And in the letter, he had asked me, because I was already writing poems and dabbling and spouting literature and poetry at everybody I could corner. And he was a writer too, but a journalist. He wrote prose, but read and loved poems and things. And he was we were kids.
Yeah.
And he wrote this letter, and in the letter he said, "You think when we're old we'll still be poets?"
Yeah.
And I came across the letter, and like 40 years later I wrote this poem answering the letter.
Yeah.
Do you want to read it? Because I haven't located it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll let you read it.
So is the title June 2016? Oh, no, that's when you wrote the poem. Okay.
Well, no, the whole thing there is the title.
That whole thing is the title. Oh, because you wrote it on June.
You should read the title.
Oh,
Then pause and read the poem.
June 2016, my answer to the question in your letter of June 1974. Yes, David, when we're old, we'll still be poets. Did you imagine me tottering around in some old colonial straightening the braided rugs and writing in the dust? Even back then, I was hoarding metaphors, waiting for this poem to be born. You were waiting for your life to be about something. That something places you in London now amid your endless aerial helix round the globe, set against the grinding calendar's wheel. I am, as ever, rooted here in Maine, my gut compass always dragging north and east, where the really big winter storms come from. I'm standing way out on the rocks, arm raised, so I can ask in semaphore. Were you thinking, even then, of lonely winter walks, perhaps with your own arm raised to the drop slot of the UPS red and blue box, your poem in its question in your letter? No, David, we never dreamt a raised fingers click and send could make an ocean vanish.
We never dreamed it.
Yeah, you couldn't.
I'm going to read it again, you don't mind?
Absolutely.
Right. David is my oldest friend. You know, he and his wife and I, they come over to the States and we get together once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you have a friendship that's endured for 50 years.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
It is a wonderful thing. Yeah. June 2016, my answer to the question in your letter of June 1974. Yes, David, when we're old, we'll still be poets. Did you imagine me tottering around in some old colonial, straightening the braided rugs and writing in the dust? Even back then, I was hoarding metaphors, waiting for this poem to be born. You were waiting for your life to be about something. That something places you in London now, amid your endless aerial helix round the globe, set against the grinding of the calendar's wheel. I am, as ever, rooted here in Maine, my gut compass always dragging north and east where the really big winter storms come from. I'm standing way out on the rocks, arms raised, so I can ask in semaphore. Were you thinking even then of lonely winter walks, perhaps with your own arm raised to the drop slot of the USPS red and blue box? Your poem with its question in the letter? No, David, we never dreamt a raised finger's click and send could make an ocean vanish. You wouldn't have to go to the red and blue mailbox and mail me a letter or a response. All you have to do is sit down at your computer and then click and send, and an ocean vanishes.
So when you found that letter, that you immediately began working on this poem?
Yes, yeah.
Wow, so that was a different.
That's probably the most. That's probably like one of the most up to date or newest or in a sense freshest things that I've ever written. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh, so I was going to ask you if you have any limitations on what you would write about. Is there anything that would be taboo?
Is there anything that would be taboo? Just off the cuff, I would say no.
Yeah.
There's nothing I would be afraid of writing about.
Yeah.
Or,
So you've kind of you've given poetry your all.
Well, whatever is emerged or asked, knocked on the door or wanted attention is what I work with.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine anything that I would say categorically, no, I don't want to write about that.
Yeah.
I would find it very difficult. I follow politics, and I'm a rabid feminist.
Mm-hmm.
And I have on my heart the thing with the refugee crisis, the homeless, and oh my God. But I don't write political. I mean, for some reason, as much as I care, I always vote.
Yeah.
I care so deeply about these issues that they have never asked me or barely scratched at me to do something about it in my
But do you think sort of through osmosis those issues appear in your poems through the love that you can
at the level of universal humanity? Yeah, it's there.
So you believe that?
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty significant.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have to literally say...
I would like everyone on the planet to have an indispensable minimum. The indispensable minimum where everyone has enough to eat, shelter, clothing, or health care. Yeah. No one gets to have too much extra until everyone on the planet has this indispensable minimum, for health and joy in life, If other people want more and willing to climb those ladders or be greedy or rich or whatever, that's fine. Yeah. But everybody on the planet should get this indispensable minimum, sustain life and health. Yeah. So that's my political view. Yeah. But I've never felt any. If I wrote that up into a poem, it would, from my point of view, would become one of those wordy things. Yeah. It would be full of all kinds of lingo. Yeah.
So do you think that's because of your early influences, that those weren't the early influences of you?
Oh, that's perfectly possible, Kevin. I never thought of that until just now. Yeah. I never was exposed to any poetry that was of that nature. Right. I remember in college I read Ginsberg's stuff and Malcolm Lowry's stuff.
Did you ever read William Burroughs?
I have, but not a favorite poet I would turn to and read a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, no. And Levine.
He was on the fringes.
There are others too.
Yes.
Right. No. Yeah. Some of them might be legitimate writers or poets, but they wouldn't attract me.
So would you concede that your poems are sort of mainstream?
Are they mainstream? Many of my poems spring directly from, like the one about Wyeth's paintings. Yeah. And painting a vanishing Maine, really. Yeah. They spring, just look at my poems. They all spring from almost like common everyday things in life. Yeah. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's not like the poem To the Muse says. It's not about fancy boyfriends and exotic vacations and pay attention. Yeah. No, it's. I think most of my poems. That beautiful autumn poem I have about the blueberry barrens.
Yeah.
Up down east,
Yeah.
turning red in the fall, and how spectacular that is.
Yeah.
Many of my poems spring out of my natural environment. Sunset in the woods. I can think of so many of them that, wanting comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can think of so many of them that are tied right down to, the woods, the forest, the landscape, the lakes.
So I think that maybe like you, I feel like, and I'm making a presumption, but that we live in a beautiful environment and we get the benefit of enjoying nature every day.
I'm a New England poet, and the other thing that I am is what they used to call a provincial poet.
Yes.
I'm not trying to write poems for people in Japan
Right.
or even Arizona.
Yeah.
I understand the limitation. I'm a provincial poet.
Yeah.
I'm a New Englander.
Yeah.
Been right around here all my life.
Yeah.
And what I mine,
Yeah.
for my art
Yeah. Yeah.
is definitely Northern New England. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no illusion about that.
It's like you're comfortable.
I'm standing out on the rocks, where the great big drag north and east, where the big winter storms come from.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm rooted here in Maine, it
Yeah.
says in one of the poems.
Yeah.
No, I could never start tinkering with philosophical or religious or political stuff in the poems. It would not. It's just not. It's not what calls on me.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
As much as I care
Yeah.
about issues and
Right.
it's not. It's for me. That's not the material of poetry. Now, Neruda, the famous Spanish poet, wrote a lot of political.
Yeah.
It was a different culture, a different kind of a following.
He was in the military, wasn't he?
I don't know too much about his.
So that's what I'm kind of getting at. It's like our environment now. If you were like living in an area that was where there were a lot of refugees and and you needed to express yourself, you might.
Home is so big and deep and an important thing to me. I'm a homebody. Home is very, very deep and meaningful for me. And because of that, when I imagine what refugees and what these people are going through, the homeless, dragging themselves across Europe, trying to find a place where they can just be safe and clean. It just, I don't want to talk about it because it just breaks my heart. And there's so little I can do. I have this little monthly charity I pay into every month. It's not for refugees, it's for something else. But it's like all I can do. It's,
You're helpless.
I am. I vote. And in recent years, it hasn't seemed to make very much difference.
So do you think you actually would take refuge in your poetry writing?
Do I take a refuge in my poems? Yeah, some of my poems comfort me. Some of my poems are about I thou poems are about one person being of comfort to another. And I do take comfort in my poems. And in the relationships I establish in the poems. But it's hard for people to believe, people who've read my poems, and they seem so concrete and so personal. That the poems are not autobiographical. A few are, a very few. I think I mentioned one a little while ago, the Blue Chair. That is an actual happening from A to Z in my life. Now, many of my poems include all kinds of details that are part of the personal experience of my life. But they're not recounting. I have a little poem called Little Brother. And I had 3 older brothers, no little brothers, but I have a poem that's about a little brother. It's like, I don't know why I steer clear of what you would call strict biography or autobiography. It's like, I don't want my poems to be about me. I'm in them, but they're not about me. I don't want them to be about me, or a few maybe, I don't want my poems to be about me. I mean, I'm in them. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I can't help being in them. I'm creating them. But no. To me, it's sort of like that's the making of a great poem is not anything that's about me. No.
So I was wondering if you feel like the craft of writing the poem is a refuge.
Yes, it is. When I have time, I can only work on my poems when I can block 3, 4, 5 hours to really work and bring stuff, So I don't work on them that frequently, and I never was prolific, and I never will be. But yes, it is a comfort when I can just clear the decks and get into the state there's a certain state of mind or whatever that I fall into where I can really get something, the satisfaction and the pleasure that I get out of getting it done, especially when I finally get it right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
Has that been consistent throughout your life?
Yeah, it's always worked that way. My creative, the way I do it, mechanically, has always been like that, and has always worked. It's like a payoff. It's like some people run to get their dopamine in their brain. If I can work for 3 or 4 or 5 hours on my poems, even if I'm not finishing one, but I'm tying something down, or really feel like I'm getting somewhere with something, there is an overwhelming sense of pleasure or satisfaction. It's like getting a hit. I mean, I've never taken drugs, so I don't know what that actually feels like, but it's sort of like, wow, this is really great. I like this. Yeah. Art does that. Some people make art, and then we have to have the audience out there. You know what I'm saying? There are a lot of people who do not make poems, but they can love and enjoy and appreciate them, and it can deepen them. It's like I go to museums and I look at great paintings. I come here and I look at paintings of yours, Kevin, and they're profound and they're meaningful to me. I'm an appreciator. I can't paint a painting. I wouldn't know where to begin. I have no inclination or desire to do that kind of art. But I'm part of your audience. We need both the people who make beauty and bring it into the world, and we need the people who love and appreciate. And we need both. The audience, it has to go back and forth.
And so I guess to wrap things up, I feel like, and I've only become conscious of this maybe in the last 10 years or so, but when you experience something that's like a great poem or a great painting or a great piece of music, you don't need to understand it. But when you have this experience with it, you carry it with you, and it's a part of you. And you just to know, for me, just to know that you've written some of your poems is really it's an epic thing in my life, because I'm looking at these and I'm like, wow, these are really beautiful, and I know the person that wrote these. And
well, it does kind of like put the cherry on top when you know the artist.
It's a privilege.
It is.
It's a privilege, but it's a privilege to, if I didn't know you, it would be a privilege
to still know the poem. It's just a slightly different privilege, that's all.
Okay, so
the quality or the degree might be a little different.
Okay, so we'll change the analogy to say I see a Rembrandt painting. When I walk up to the Rembrandt painting, and I can be totally mystified. I don't understand at all how that he created that, how he got the flesh tones, how he got the depth, how he makes it look more alive than the person that was probably the model. I don't understand that. And then I walk away with that understanding that I cannot even begin to comprehend that, but I'm satisfied at that, and I've had a really amazing experience with it. And then when I go home, I can take that and I can bring that up, and it rises up in me, and it's like, wow, this person was a humanitarian.
You touch on one of the most prominent and important things about everything we've been talking about, and that's memory. Because we're human, and we have memory. It's like you can go back inside yourself. As often as you want to, and you can reapprehend it. You can re-experience it. I call it apprehending it. And that is what our memory gives us. And on top of all of that, 10 or 15 years down the road, you can suddenly apprehend it again. And remember it, and the experience and the meaning, and how it might have developed and matured and changed and expanded. All of that can keep going on because a great work of art has touched you. And that's what I mean when I talk about poems and memorable speech. The poem has to be created and built and carefully made, so that it really works and has that impact. And then 5 or 10 years later, either because you want to or something happens in your life and you need to understand better, or your mind and your memory can go right back and re-experience it, re-appreciate it, re-enjoy it. That is what makes on top of everything else that's so wonderful about the art is the fact that it can be inside of us, and we can, in our memories, go back and have it over and over and over again. That's very important to me in my life.
And I think that having gratitude for the people that do create that's really important, that I have that gratitude. And because we can have epic experiences with each other, and even with people that are deceased, and continue a relationship.
Sure.
And we can bring those up at any time. But when we have creative things that people have created to benefit humanity at large, or anybody that will partake in it, and they've left that for us here.
Right.
It's like I realize that you don't even really have to own it. You don't even have to have it. You don't have to possess it, because it's more like a life force within you. It becomes
It is.
Right. And
my friend who died in 1974, she is alive and well inside of me. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. Now, it doesn't have to go any further than that.
Yeah.
My life is richer, fuller, enhanced just by that.
Yeah.
And that's enough. I don't need to preach it to the world. I don't need to write my autobiography and let everybody know.
Yeah.
But if something comes up inside of me that's part of my art and my creativity and words and a poem, then I can let it into the poem.
Yeah.
It can come out. And some experiences in my life will always stay in my memory inside myself. And some few of them may surge and come to the surface and get into my art. And I'm not trying to milk my personal experiences to create pseudo art. I'm not interested in doing that.
I know that.
Like I said, I have very strong opinions. I know how bad I am. Well, have fun with your tape and editing and all the good stuff you do.
Yeah. So once again, Roland's book is Reaching for Quiet. And is it okay if I put a link to your email address?
Yeah. Main Authors Publishing brought the book out in 2012.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've got like 25 to 30 copies of the book left or something. Yeah. So it's still available. Yeah. And I'm hoping within a year or so to have a whole new book, a new edition, including the new material.
Wow, I can't wait for that to come out. That's going to be great.
We're done now, correct?
Wait a minute. We're not quite done. No, we are done. I just wanted to thank you for joining us
on the Serenity Prayer.
No, well, maybe we do.
Oh.
No, but thanks for joining us on Being Unique, and thank you, Roland Labrie, very much.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I really, really appreciate it.
And I appreciate it too.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Now,